Today, we're diving into a deep scientific mystery. It's all about this strange, ancient relationship between molecules that plants make and these highly specific receptors inside the human brain. And it makes you ask a really fundamental question. Did plants actually help shape our evolution? So, it really all starts with what seems like a simple question. You've got this one particular molecule from the cannabis plant, what a biochemist would call a secondary metabolite, and it does something, well, really weird.
It fits into a receptor in our brain with this unbelievable lock and key precision. I mean, think about that. It's like you're walking through a forest, you find a random ancient key on the ground, and you take it home, and what do you know? It just happens to perfectly unlock your front door. How is that even possible? To figure it out, we've got to look at the lock and the key themselves.
Right, so this apparent coincidence, this is what we're calling the biological mystery of the lock and key. And it's a puzzle that sits right at the intersection of biochemistry and just, well, mind-bogglingly deep evolutionary time. Okay, let's break this puzzle down. So on one side, you have our body. That's the lock. We have these incredibly specific receptors, CB1 and CB2, and they're part of this huge, important signaling network. Then on the other side, you've got the key, a molecule like THC from a plant. And it just so happens to bind to our receptors with an incredible affinity. So the first question that pops into your head, right, is, did we somehow evolve for the plants? Was this all part of some grand design? Well, to find the real answer, we have to become evolutionary detectives. We need to look way, way back into deep time. We have to figure out what our internal lock was originally for, long before humans were even in the picture. And the answer is just staggering. The endocannabinoid system, the ECS, is an incredibly ancient piece of our biology. We're talking more than 500 million years old. It's been conserved across vertebrates for eons, hundreds of millions of years before the cannabis plant even existed. So here's the absolute crucial point. The ECS wasn't just sitting around waiting for a plant to come along. Not at all. It's a deeply conserved internal network that was built for one thing: survival. It uses its own internal keys, molecules our body makes, like anandamide, to regulate the really important stuff like our stress response, our immune system, and our metabolism. Okay, so if the system wasn't built for plants, how on earth do we explain that perfect fit? Well, the real scientific explanation is actually far more elegant and, frankly, more interesting than some grand design. It's a classic case of what you might call an opportunistic hijack. And the key scientific concept here, this is a really important one, is acceptation. It's a fantastic word. All it means is that a biological trait that evolved for one reason gets co-opted or repurposed for a completely new job down the line. You know, the classic example here is feathers. They almost certainly first evolved on dinosaurs for insulation, basically to keep them warm. It was only much, much later that they were exapted for a totally revolutionary new purpose: flight. Same structure, new job. And this is exactly what happened here. As the source paper puts it, these plant molecules just opportunistically engaged with a system that was already there. In other words, the plants basically hacked a pre-existing system. No special plan needed. They just happened to make a key that fit a very, very old lock. Okay, so that's the theory. It's elegant, it makes sense, but as scientists, we need more. Where is the hard evidence that humans have even been interacting with these plants long enough for it to matter evolutionarily? For that, we turn to the amazing field of archaeological chemistry. And what we find is just compelling. We have solid chemical proof, anchors in time, showing humans using these plants thousands of years ago. And we're not just talking about finding a few seeds here and there. No, we're talking about clear, ritualistic use, from a Judahite shrine in Tel Arad nearly 3,000 years ago, all the way to funerary braziers high in the Pamir Mountains. This shows a long, deep history of intentional use. And this isn't just a guess. This is rigorous chemical analysis. At the Tel Arad site, scientists found THC, CBD, and even its degradation product, CBN, burned onto a limestone altar right alongside frankincense. And at Jirzankal, the residue was high in THC, which strongly suggests people were selecting for plants with more psychoactive properties. The major takeaway here is that this wasn't accidental. This was intentional, ritual behavior deep in our path. So this ancient intentional use, this is where it all comes together. It allows us to form a testable hypothesis. If humans have been using these plants as chemical tools for millennia, could that cultural practice have actually created a feedback loop that shaped our very genes?
This idea is known as gene-culture coevolution, sometimes called niche construction. And it works kind of like this. First, a culture adopts a new behavior, like using these plants. Now, because of natural genetic variation, some people just respond more beneficially than others. Maybe it helps them with social bonding or managing stress. Well, those individuals might gain a slight edge, a survival advantage. And over many, many generations, the genes responsible for that beneficial response could slowly become more common in the population. The culture is literally shaping the genome. Now, right here, it is absolutely critical that we draw a hard, bright line in the sand. This scientific hypothesis of gene-culture coevolution is worlds away from some of the, well, let's call them speculative narratives you might have heard floating around.
Let's be crystal clear. The stoned ape theory makes a huge, untestable causal claim that psychedelics somehow caused human consciousness to pop into existence. The scientific hypothesis we're discussing is a much more subtle and testable modulatory claim. It argues that plant use created weak selection pressures that fine-tuned systems we already had, systems for stress, immunity, social behavior. One is a fun story. The other is a falsifiable scientific hypothesis we can actually test with data. And you don't have to just take our word for it. The actual scientists behind this research make this distinction themselves, point blank. They explicitly state that their framework is designed to move this conversation away from untestable stories and into the realm of rigorous science.
So, what's the big picture here? What's the main thing to remember? It's not that we evolved for plants. That's the wrong way to look at it. Instead, it's that our biology and our culture are locked in this subtle, millennia-long dance, a feedback loop. And in that dance, plants, these complex chemical tools we found in our environment, may have been a real partner, exerting a measurable influence on our genes over time.
And that really leaves us with a final, pretty provocative thought, doesn't it? It makes you wonder, could the very chemical tools we adopted from the natural world have, over deep time, ended up subtly reshaping and fine-tuning the toolmakers?